Venus and Pluto are going to be conjunct on the 19th, and I've done a lot of historical research about prior Venus-Pluto conjunctions and Venus-Pluto and hard aspect in general, and I want to share some of that research with you to make my point today. It may seem like a relatively minor thing, Venus and Pluto. Venus is, oh, it's women, it's like arts, it's fashion. It does have to do with finance, money, that pulls people in sometimes, but one of the main reasons that drew my attention is I kept finding it at the scene of the crime in charts related to major world treaties. And that, to me, I don't know about to you, but to me, that's a huge deal. I want to show you and share with you some of the research and the charts that I found that are related to this, because it's really cool, guys. This is the day that FDR declared war on Japan, and as you can see, Venus and Pluto are in hard aspect. Venus is at 2 degrees of Aquarius, Pluto is at 5 degrees of Leo. I just marked this end of World War II, but really what it is the day that the Japanese formally surrendered. And as you can see, Venus is at 2 degrees of Leo, which I do think is interesting because it's almost exactly opposing the same degree that Venus was at 2 degrees of Aquarius when FDR declared war on Japan. War is the breaking of peace, the breaking of treaties, the destruction of that peace to create something new, right? So with the opposition, I think that was what was happening. And then with the conjunction, there's a formation of a new standard of peace. This is the Aries Ingress for 1945, the year the war ended, and Venus and Pluto are once again in hard aspect in this Aries Ingress. For mundane astrology, you generally want to always check the Aries Ingress and other ingresses as well to see what events will happen in the rest of the year. And Venus in this chart is at 3 degrees of Taurus square Pluto at 8 degrees of Leo, and diplomatic relations were significantly changed. We're talking about Aries Ingresses. I do have a couple more to show you that have Venus and Pluto in hard aspect. This is the Aries Ingress for 1775. I have it set for Boston, Massachusetts. And Venus in this chart is at 17 degrees of Aries, and Pluto is at 26 degrees of Capricorn. They're just under 10 degrees still with an orb of a square, and the American Revolution started. Lexington and Concord happened not long after this Aries Ingress. I also want to point out, though, that once again with the conjunction, it does seem to, I don't want to say it always leans more positive, but it does seem to lean a bit more positive. This is the Aries Ingress for 1865, the year that the Civil War ended, and in the Ingress, Venus is in her own sign conjunct Pluto, and there was a creation of a new political treaty standard with the end of the American Civil War. For this one, the inner wheel is the Aries Ingress of 1779, and as you can see, the Venus-Pluto conjunction made it into the Ingress that year, and that year there were quite a few major significant diplomatic developments. However, one of the biggest ones was that Spain agreed to assist France in its efforts against Great Britain in the Revolutionary War, and it was a treaty that was done in secret, which I just thought was important to point out because it fits the archetype exceptionally well. Pluto has quite a bit to do with secret power negotiations, especially in conjunction with Venus. I also think it's interesting to point out in the context of this one that the treaty itself happened when the moon was conjunct Venus inside of its exaltation. The inner wheel for this one is the conjunction of Venus and Pluto at 0 degrees of Aquarius on February 1st, 1778, and 5 days later, on February 6th, 1778, was the Treaty of Alliance and Treaty of Amity and Commerce that was signed between the U.S. and France, and it was the first official French recognition of the United States as a republic. A pretty big deal, I think. I also think it's interesting, compelling, that the treaty itself happened when Mercury and Venus were conjunct, Mercury retrograde conjunct Venus, coming off of her conjunction with Pluto. So it's all three of those planets working together in this instance. And then I just have it set for the moment of the Venus-Mercury conjunction, but that day the moon went on to trine the Venus-Mercury conjunction exactly, and also the Sun at the time of the Venus-Pluto synodic conjunction. So those would be timing triggers and significant for timing, as well as the Uranus-Mercury trine in this chart and the Moon hitting the degree of Uranus later that day. The Venus-Pluto conjunction that we have coming up, it'll happen at 3 degrees of Aquarius on January 19th, and I think that this is significant. The day that the Sun is conjunct the Moon at the time of the Venus-Pluto conjunction is the day that a significant treaty between the US and Russia ends. It's called the New START Treaty, and it has to do with nuclear arms. I'm not saying that to freak anyone out. I'm just saying it is a significant international treaty that fits the archetype exceptionally well. I also think that there's potential for other treaties after or even while Venus is applying to Pluto. I've seen treaties happen just as Venus exits the sign. I've seen them happen when Mercury and Venus were conjunct, like I showed in another one of the examples. And I think that this is just a really cool thing to notice. Before I let you go, I also think that it's interesting to note that Mercury itself, Mercury does rule documents, etc. So Mercury and Venus are both involved with the formalization of treaties, but Venus is more the diplomatic relation side of a treaty, and then Mercury would be like the physical treaty signing itself, right? And I do think it's interesting to note that Mercury is square Uranus at the time that that treaty will end. And as so far as I know, there are no plans for a new one, which is sort of a big deal and very Venus-Pluto worthy, in my opinion.